And so, whew, grand rising. If that didn't open your heart, maybe this next part will. But I'm pretty sure it did. It was hard for me to keep a dry eye during rehearsals. And thank you so much for honoring my special request for that song. Because it really sets the pace for us to begin to look at this idea of rising up. And so, if you're new here, my name is Reverend Dr. Alice Reid, and I am the spiritual director here at Center for Spiritual Living. And I want to say Happy Easter to you, or Happy Ostera, or Happy Spring, all of these ways of recognizing, and I think the Baha'is have their, I'm not going to, yes, what she said. And so there are so many. Passover was started on April 1st and will end on April 9th. There are so many ways that humanity recognizes this renewal period in our calendar, especially on the in the northern hemisphere. It's a little different in the southern hemisphere, and it marks. Easter marks the end of the Holy Week for many Christians around the world. And my observation is that when we have these beautiful individuals who are celebrating their love for God in their own and unique way, that sometimes it feels to me like there's a little too much attention on the crucifixion and not enough attention on the resurrection. It's the idea that there is a punishing God who needed retribution by giving its only son to die for our sins. Now, in our movement and our philosophy, we see sin simply as a mistake, missing the mark, doing something you would rather not do. It's not, if you sinned last night, you are not damned to eternal damnation, I promise you. We don't see it that way. We do see it as an opportunity when we find ourselves in a space where we're not living up to our own ideals and our own standards, that we have this teaching that reminds us of a wholeness that lives within us, that rising up to our greater known being self, our greater Christ consciousness, our greater higher wisdom self. And yet I can see the attraction for people, because somehow when we look at this story of Jesus and the brokenness and the crucifixion, it reminds us of the brokenness we might experience in life. It reminds us of the places in our lives that are less than perfect in form that we might be experiencing. Because when you find yourself struggling, or if you find yourself suffering, or if you're witnessing or loving someone who is struggling or suffering, it's kind of hard to see things in a different light. It's kind of hard to see things from a place of perfect, whole, and complete, right? Yeah, when you're in the midst of all of that. And so I can see the attraction for it. And then somehow when I look out at our culture, when I look at how people move through life, it seems to me that we are moving towards this propensity of avoidance of pain and suffering at all costs, at least in the culture that I live in. There's always something to do to mitigate that suffering so we don't have to feel it. And as religious scientists, as people who practice this philosophy, oftentimes it's tempting to just go right to prayer, right to the place of wanting it to go away and wanting prayer to be the thing to make that thing go away. And I'm thinking, at least from my perspective, that there's a perfection, or there's a wholeness when we recognize the suffering and the struggle long enough to be present with it, so that we can rise up through it, so that we can walk through it, so that we can glean whatever it is that we need to glean from that suffering that happens to be visiting upon us, so that we can remember our wholeness, so that we can come back to a place of oneness. And so it's a both and with the crucifixion and the resurrection as the mythos for this Easter holiday as we look at it metaphysically. Now, I love the story of Jesus, when you read about the historical Jesus, when you read about the times that Jesus came up in where he was Jewish, he was not Christian, and he came up in a time when the Jewish religion had a practice of outcasting the poor and outcasting the sick and outcasting those that were less than, and only the pure could enjoy the temple. And this didn't sit right with him. Some part of him knew from the very core of his being that regardless of your station in life, you were one with God. And so he became a champion for those that were left behind. He became a champion for those that were outcast, and he began to help them to rise up and to lift them up to see their wholeness and their oneness. Now, for me, that just really opens my heart. And yet, at the same time, when I am walking through this life the same as you are, sometimes suffering can be hard to sit with. We all know people in our lives or in our circles of influence that are suffering or challenged. And sometimes, at least this is what happens for me, sometimes I get a little afraid that if I get a little too close to their suffering, it might just suck me in. It might just bring me into a place of pain that I'm not ready to deal with. And I think the model that we have for the story of Jesus of Nazareth is that he allowed suffering to break him open. He allowed the suffering to open his heart completely so that when he saw suffering, he only felt love. Wow, that's an amazing way to walk through life, to be able to be present with someone's suffering and not to be in it, but to feel a love that is so powerful that it wells up within you and not only serves you, but serves those that you're with. Wow, that is an amazing example. It was an amazing example 2,000 years ago. It's an amazing example today as we're walking through life, as we see suffering around us, to be able to bring forth a sense of wholeness and oneness and love, and to be present, to be truly present with it. What I want us to take away from this, to take into, we have a ritual for you today, and what I want us to take away from this idea of the Easter story of crucifixion and resurrection is that there is always a dying and a rebirth. There is always a dying and a renewal. There's always an opportunity for us to move through something and to get to the other side, to remember who we are, to rise up, to come to that place again where we know that God lives within us and within everyone around us, and there's no exceptions. And so today we have a ritual for you, and so when you came into the sanctuary, you were given a flower. And you might notice that there's a very barren-looking planter in the front of the room and an altar, and that's very intentional. Because when we first come to a place of witnessing suffering in any way, in our own lives or in the lives of others, it feels very barren. And so we're going to invite you to bring forth something that breaks your heart open, not to suffer, but to resurrect it. And so I'm going to ask, did everyone get a flower? Is there anyone who did not get a flower? All right, raise your hand, and Cynthia, our volunteer, is going to grab a couple blossoms for you. Looks like we need 3. And so keep your hand raised, and we'll get you a blossom. Thank you, Cynthia. And so I'm going to give you some instruction before we start, so I'm going to ask you to just hang in there while I explain how we're going to do this. So as I said, I want to invite you to bring something forward that you might find insurmountable, something that is just too big for you to hold by yourself. It could be something personal. It could be a relationship. It could be a diagnosis. It could be something you're seeing out in the world that makes you sad or angry. But something that where you're willing to step into a resurrected place with it. And I'm going to invite our practitioners to take their places now. And before the rest of you stand up, as you are in this place of being willing to have an experience of resurrection, we have a prayer wall that is going to be on the side of the room here. And I'm going to invite you, when I say let's begin, to come up and move through the sanctuary in a clockwise fashion, in a counterclockwise fashion. And you're going to move to the right, and please see a practitioner. I want you to think about that thing that breaks your heart, that thing that might feel insurmountable, that thing where you're ready to experience wholeness, and bring that prayer request to one of our practitioners or ministers. And tell them your name and tell them what you would like to experience instead. And for those of you that are watching at home, you can give your prayer request in the comments, or if it's private, I invite you to email it to me personally at alice@cslcv.org, and I'll make sure our practitioners pray for it. And once you've received your prayer from a practitioner, I'm going to invite you to continue to move in this direction in the sanctuary, and to, now that you have been invited through the prayer practice for renewal, to symbolize your renewal by placing your flower in the planter, and then you can come back to your seats. A lot of instructions, but I think it's pretty powerful practice. And we have some wonderful musicians who will accompany you. And I invite you to move through this when you're ready in a very sacred way, keeping the sacredness and the silence, except when you're with your practitioner. And so let's begin. And practitioners, when you finish up, you can come up and put your flower in as well. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. And the Sufis applaud like this. Ooh. And so we'll allow our practitioners to come up and place their flowers in the planter as well. It's always beautiful to see as our planter is filling up completely, to see how we can start with something that is challenging and we can walk through it full circle to something that is blossoming. Thank you. So those at home, I would invite you to write down for your prayer request what it is you would like to see happen in the world when your prayers are answered, and that can be your renewal process. And for us today, I want to close our time in lieu of prayer. Ernest Holmes, the founder of Centers for Spiritual Living and the Science of Mind movement, wrote in his book from the same title, Science of Mind, that one of the most used mantras in our movement, there is one life. This life is God. This life is perfect. This life is my life now. And what Ernest told us about that powerful mantra was that we had to go the whole way. We couldn't stop with, there's one life, this life is God's life. We had to bring it home into ourselves. And so what I'm going to ask us to do is a little call and response. And as I say the first line, I want you to repeat it, and we'll do this mantra together a few times. So if you'll repeat after me. There's only one life. This life is God's life. This life is perfect. This life is my life now. Again, this life, there is only one life. This life is God's life. This life is perfect. This life is my life now. And one final time, there's only one life. This life is God's life. This life is perfect. This life is my life now. And so it is.